Hello, my friend. My name is Anton from Calling.com, and today we will discuss a new topic that recently popped up on our radar. Namely, we will talk today about the new exam announced by Cisco, the expert certification from the DevNet, which is called actually Cisco Certified DevNet Expert. If you basically seen the name, yeah, it should be very similar to CD. I tend to think probably it will be called CCDNE. We'll see, the time will show. Ultimately, the DevNet Expert, what is it about? For those of you who were watching closely this development of the Cisco DevNet area, you might have seen that for the past roughly 2 years, probably, about 2 years, Cisco has introduced this certification with a focus to bring the automation to the same level of certification and therefore to the same level of importance all other Cisco traditional technology, which is very good. So what does it mean for us? Previously, we have DevNet Associate exam and DevNet specialization for DevNet Core, and then service providers and data centers and all other stuff. With the introduction of the expert level, they have introduced basically only a new lab exam, and if you have passed previously the Dev Core exam, all you need to do in order to obtain this wonderful DevNet expert status is to pass the lab exam. This is what we are going to look into right now. What is it? How did? So on the web page, you could find that Cisco DevNet Expert is already announced. In fact, it was announced roughly 1 month ago in the end of October 2021. However, the exam itself is not yet available. It will be available later. The first date when you can take the exam is May 2nd of May 2022. So we have roughly half a year to prepare to the exam, which is very good because the exam has quite a bit of topics, and you will see a lot of things that you might want to cover, especially put your hands on. So as said, the exam consists of 2 things. The Dev Core exam, if you pass and learn to this is a API-based standard exam, which you pass in the test center or the online, and the lab exam for those who was taking the NECC exam previously. Experience is very familiar, Cisco facility, where you come and do the test. I was passing the CCA exam twice for the service provider right and switch, and I know that it's quite a damn thing, and I also know there is a lot of preparation that you need to put up front in order to be able really to deliver the result in the 8 hours. I don't believe this exam would be ever easier than any others. So let's take a look in the content of the lab exam. The lab consisted all about their software development, and I think I need to emphasize here is not only about the automation, the network automation, because obviously this is a leitmotif. There are much more things that on the network automation. So let's take a look. The exam contains several important topics. The first one, software design, development, and deployment. The idea here is that you guys looking into the existing frameworks which are existing in the market, how the application could be delivered. So looking into the various clouds, on-prem, hybrid, public cloud, what are the components that are available for the cloud, where you could place your cloud containers, VM, how you can orchestrate the development of or deployment of the workloads in this cloud, looking the aspect also the high availability, resiliency, performance. So basically everything which is underpinning their infrastructure, which we have for the applications these days. Besides that part, obviously, it's including the deployment scenarios, gap analysis, and others, the important part of this block is also CI/CD with the Git. So in this case, you obviously need to be very familiar with the Git tool as such, so what is doable for you, and also various aspects how it could be deployed in the, for example, GitLab CI/CD pipeline or GitHub Action, so that you could understand what are the building blocks, what are the major steps, and how these components, how these aspects can come together so that you can get access, so that you can practice this before you go to the exam. Once you practice with this element, you're getting the familiarization. Again, folks, this is a practical exam, so it would be expected that you not only can memorize and answer the question whether CI/CD support or not, or what is it like the stages, or what the GitHub action, but really go and implement in the real environment these steps. It's yet hard to tell what exactly would be the questions, right? Because it's just half a year from one we would see. But based on the experience that I have taken in the preparation to say routing switching, or what is called right now enterprise and service providers, I know that what is important in order you can pass this exam, and probably from the first attempt, is practice as much as you can. Practice, take the various scenarios, whatever you have from the real life, or whatever you see in the various other examples, and then do it once, twice, or try to dig into the details, try intentionally to make the errors. The experience tell me from the past and say that there will be a lot of questions, because if you think about how it was or is in the lab exams from the CCA with 3 various parts, probably something will be the same, we'll see. But regardless of which part, I mean the troubleshooting, configuration, or the like diagnostics, what is important and very in-depth understands the basic functionality, and almost to the level of live typing, to be able to type the command and understand what each command means from the Git or from the cloud perspective, so that you could easily navigate through the scenario rather than trying to memorize how these clouds are working. The next block, which is from the percentage perspective, is relatively big, infrastructure as a code. This quite an interesting naming, because it bundles a lot of different things. First of all, everything which is touching the REST API and Python. So looking into the description, you see we talk about the automating solution, putting the various constraints such as network impact, risk, and tool selection, which we could think probably there will be some considerations whether you should deploy the sequential automation or parallelized or synchronous, what are the risks are using with them, and others. The build of the Python REST API, so that you can interact with the element through the REST API to collect necessary information, or probably to build your own REST API framework using the Flask or Fast API Django. There is no yet much details, but we should better prepare that we can both deploy our own API gateway, so I said like Flask, Fast API, or Django, which can then receive the request, which is obviously the Python thing, or Python client that can interact with the external web applications through the REST API and collect the data. Python CL applications mean that you need to be able to provide the parameters to the application, either through standard input or through the arguments. Again, this is all about the Python. Looking further, yes, provided we have external REST API, create some application that would be able to communicate and grab the data. Then we come the part about the netconf and restconf, so how to read and understand the YAML models, how to create the messages for the restconf and netconf to call the corresponding parse and understand the response. Very important, because YAML is a background or the major building block for the network automation in the model-driven world, what is happening these days. XPath, how to build a filter, read it, understand. Looking further, we have the Ansible. So how we build the Ansible playbooks, how we create loops, controls, conditional, various templates, variables, using various plugins to connectors, network elements, CLI, HTTPI, and netconf. So basically all the possible elements. What is important though, yet in the blueprint, we do not see the JNMI, at least at this stage. And probably, well, it definitely appearing later, but from the perspective of the device configuration, as of now, JNMI is not included. CLI, netconf, restconf. What is so interesting, the Terraform is included. Terraform, when we talk about the network automation, is not used. It is used for the general infrastructure automation, because predominantly it allows you to work with like public clouds, AWS, GCP, Azure. This is a primary area where the Terraform being deployed. However, The Terraform has provided for the Cisco ACI. It probably is the reason why the Terraform is included in the exam, because it would allow you to manage the ACI-based infrastructure. From this perspective, it makes sense, obviously, familiarize yourself with the Terraform, understand the syntax and others, and be able to deploy the basic things such as implementation of the resources in the public clouds, private clouds, probably with some other elements like ACI and other tools. NSO, obviously, is the heart of the Cisco automation architecture. TLF NSO, acquired now Cisco NSO, allows to create their configuration, their NSO. That's why we see also in this exam, we see that basically what we need to do to create the service template, able to create a basic YARN model for a certain service, so basically creating our own YARN model, create the actions to verify the status of the service, and implement monitoring with Python VM log files. So, so obviously important to understand NSO, understand how it is working, and get into that detail so that you are able to configure. The interesting thing about NSO, a few years ago, I believe 1 or 2 years ago, it was made publicly available and free for the non-commercial usage. Basically, everyone could download, start using the NSO, practicing how to write the code with the NSO. Going further, we actually landed in the network automation and programmability dedicated session. So what we have here, how to create and modify and troubleshoot scripts using the Python. It's basically all about the Python and automation of the networking devices with all sort of APIs available in the Cisco world. As you see, ACI, AppDynamics, DNI Center, FDM, Intersite, RSXC, Meraki, and so on. So the idea is that it might be generally any API. You should be able, provided you have the SDA documentation and certain understanding behind how the API is working, create or troubleshoot the Python script that would allow you to complete the certain automation task. Configuration of the RSXC is also quite interesting, how we can configure the various aspects of the networking device, talking about Cisco RSXC, so something that's probably the most popular Cisco operating system, widely used in the enterprise world. Interfaces, static routes, VLAN, access controllers, BGP, or SPF. So basically, the standard configuration element. I do not expect that configuration would be super in depth complicated. I mean, so that all version of BGP hurdles, obviously it's expected that probably you understand what BGP and SPF is. However, the main focus would be here, what I would expect, the work with the YARN models, the work with the available elements and the components of the automation, and writing the script to implement them. So the focus would be more on Python and interacting with the documentation and networking device, rather than complexity of the BGP or OSPF. Deployment application on Cisco RSXC. In the guest show, also the possibility to run some extra apps which are probably outside of the Cisco XE standard, so something that is existing outside of standard XE with the possibility to run into the shell. PYTS for the testing, very interesting aspects of how to create a test-based scenario to test Cisco iOS XE Nexus. So basically, as you see, enterprise and data center devices to perform the validation, creating the scenario, and running the test job to get the results and assessment of the network health. Then we get to the telemetry, design a model telemetry solution based on the given business and technical requirements. So where we have a JNMI and gRPC and netcom. So again, this is about understanding how RPC or how the telemetry is working in the device, how it is configured, and how you could create this solution. It's not interesting though. It's interesting though it's not provided the details what to which degree you need to develop a solution, like create a really configuration, or it would be something more text-wise or like diagnostics. Would be interesting to see, but understanding of the telemetry and the models existing to consume telemetry and collect is very important. Also interesting, they're working with the Yan model telemetry. So understanding how the model-driven telemetry is working and creating a subscription or creating the Yan model to implement this subscription with various elements, as you see, elementing which models you're using to connect, how to, or which types of telemetry existing, on change, event-driven optimization, and security. So those elements are very important to get this solution. And again, all of the things we are so far discussing, you need to have a real hands-on experience, practice experience, and as you see on more than one platform. So Cisco AS, ISXC, we could say they're almost the same, however, there are certain deviations, and Nexus. We don't have so far ISXR, and they say so security, but it looks so far, and service provider products are not included in this exam. The last point, I believe, or two actually more, the containers. We touched in the first point of our description, their application, the description that application are running in the cloud, public, private, hybrid, and so on. Here, this is more in-depth understanding what are the building blocks of the cloud. The containers are one of the most important building blocks. So the idea is that you understand the Docker file here, how to create your own image, so how to structure a file, how to build, what are the building blocks, being able to create the proper Docker file, including all the components. Once you deploy that, you also would need to be able to deploy the container using Docker component, as we see, including all the necessary elements, how we can run this application together. So afterwards, we see that their Kubernetes is included to a degree. Given this is a 10% block, it's hard to assess basically how in-depth Kubernetes would be involved, because it's itself quite a big and complicated topic. However, we could see that there's an expectation that you could work with the main Kubernetes building blocks, deployment, secret services, ingress, volumes, namespaces. Honestly, I wouldn't expect that it's expected you to be too deep on this level, but really the amount of the elements, even in this 10% block, is relatively high. kubectl, so you need to be able to work with the Kubernetes through the kubectl, which is the main how it's mainly managed. Right. And the last bit is troubleshooting with Docker infrastructure. So basically how your host is communicated to the our external world. So how to make sure that traffic is passing through containers, how the internal Docker networking is working in standard bridge-based networks. And the last component is security. So leveraging their like OWASP practice for security of the code, how to perform the input validation, authentication, access control, cryptography, error handling, dealing with the OpenSSL to generate the certificates, sending CSR to provide a certification request to the authority, and working with various authentication and security means also working with tokens headers to work with REST API in secure way. So as you see, the list of the topic is very, very wide, and is touching really a lot of the domains, predominantly domains outside of our traditional networking world. Obviously, if you have started training with a Dev Associate, DevNet Associate, DevNet Core, you already have exposure to some of them. But again, from the experience of Pacency Lab, there would be a lot of real questions. They're not necessarily super deep. There might be some deep part like diagnostic, something like this, but it might be about of building, like, you know, the high scale lab or so high scale the solution in some period of time. We'll see closer to the date if they would share more about the exam structure, given that the exam was in general, the intent to have this exam was published only roughly 1 month ago. There are still not much details. Once we hear that, we will update you. Now, There are a lot of topics, I mean, from this practical perspective. And one of the questions you might think, okay, but probably there are too much things in this exam, so whether it works to go for the DevNet Expert at all. We think that this exam DevNet Expert shows a variety of the topics which are existing for the, to be precise, not only network automation engineers or network engineers, but more even like software developers in the area. And as we're talking about the merger or between the traditional network automation and software development, of using their software development practices and tool to better manage a network, we could take a look what is existing in the market of certification as well, which what might help you or what might you think that is another interesting way to go. So first, probably the Python certification by the Python Institute. Very interesting certification for those who would like to have a job in the area of the Python development. It's not focused on the network automation, but it's focused on the core components of the Python, variables, loops, controls, class, various functions, external models. This is generally very important basis for any software developer and also for the network automation, because network automation is a particular use case of the software development. Multiple layers on the hierarchy, pretty much like we have in the Cisco, like CCNA, CCNPC. Same story here. Entry level, you could think about CCN, associate, like CCNA, and professional. The exams are created in the way that some materials available online for free, some are through the training, but they contain quite complete syllabuses, so what you are expected to know in order to successfully pass the exam. Quite an interesting starting point, especially for those if you are not yet familiar with the Python. Another interesting exam existing in the cloud track. If you're interested in the Docker, if you're interested in the containers, if you're interested in the Kubernetes and how the real cloud native applications are working, the Linux Foundation has a number of the trainings and certification passes as well. Certification in the Kubernetes world, there are the most popular are CKA, Certified Kubernetes Administrator, and a few more, Kubernetes for developers, Kubernetes for security. So a lot of the elements which are allowing to build and manage Kubernetes. You remember in the DevNet, there was something about the Kubernetes. This is all this application of this certification is about. Ansible is product right now of the Red Hat, and Red Hat has their own certification. And as you see in many aspects, network or management and automation, system administration, engineer, architect, a lot of specialist certifications. So one of such specialist certification is Red Hat specialist in the Ansible network automation. So this is exam and corresponding training is dedicated for those who are doing the initial steps in the Ansible and is willing to get recognition from the vendor who has created, well, to be precise, who has acquired and now supporting the Ansible, that his or her skills in the Ansible are good enough. So you see a lot of trainings existing, a lot of certification, and a lot of people are asking ourselves, provided that we are doing a lot of the job, blog post, product in the GitHub, in the automation skills, where to start. So there is one of the important things that we need to know. Obviously, DevNet and general Cisco certification opening the door for all the engineers, or for many engineers, probably not for all, into the networking world. And the same with the automation. Normally, the quality of the materials, the quality of the assessment is relatively high. The same stage, what is the problem or the problem of this exam? They're only about Cisco. And the real world is much wider than Cisco. So in order to help you to master all this topic, or probably not all, but we'll take a look which of these topics, we have a training for you, which is called Zero to Hero Network Automation Training, which we have composed and successfully running already for 2 years. We started it before DevNet was a thing. However, by reviewing the content right now with basically our guess, what we should include in the training was pretty much in line with what DevNet Expert Lab exam has itself. So what we provide in the training for you is a comprehensive 10 session, each session is 5 hours, so 50 hours intensive, with roughly about 50 to 60 hours of the lab, which gives you very good input and preparation for this DevNet lab exam. We have the details about the Linux installation, management, securing Linux, KVM, containerization, building and installing the Docker configuration and troubleshooting of the Docker networking, creating your own Docker images, integrating your setups with the GitHub, Docker Hub, so working with the Git on updating the elements. So everything that is touching the containerization beside the Kubernetes part and working with the Git is included in our training in a few sessions. Then everything that is touching the aspects of detailed work with model-driven automation, such as data modeling itself, Yang, you will create your own Yang models during our training, and you will read and understand others, exactly what is needed for DevNet Expert, looking into the details of all possible encodings, XML, JSON, JavaScript. We even provide you much more. We provide you the details what you need for telemetry as well. So how protocol buffer is created, and giving you possibility to, on the message level, on the level of the protocols and working with the open source tool, to work with different vendors, Cisco, Nokia, Kubernetes, Arista, and some others, to work with their automation. Don't think, okay, I have a Cisco, and in the training I have Cisco, IO6C, Nexus. In the training we have the IO6R. So how is it relevant for me? The answer will be it is relevant to you a lot, because you will master very well the netconf, restconf, and JNMI and gRPC, the telemetry aspects, to working with the various vendors, what you would need to prepare for the training. Once you understand the basics and what we are focusing on, fundamentals, how all the elements is working, a lot of hands-on experience, I said, roughly 50 to 70 hours of lab, depending on how quickly you can develop the stuff. So you can then easily add to this package Cisco IO6C or Nexus, and you will be quite comfortable with developing the automation solution for them, because you will understand their building blocks, how to read YAML models, how to use them, and it will be even more important for the exam, because even if you provided a new YAML model you're not yet familiar with, you'll be able to quickly learn and understand how this stuff is working. Then we'll talk into the Linux management and automation using the shell scripts or bash, which would be also useful for you in the IO6C around the shell script, because under the hood the shell language is the same across different platforms. The same shell language is used on the Cisco Nexus, on the IO6C. The same we are using in the Linux, and explaining how to write the shell script, how to interact with the platform, and get and process the result. Again, we're providing you a lot of examples outside of Cisco world and from the Cisco world, and all together you are getting the exact view on how this tool is working. Then you're adding to the Cisco IO6I Nexus, and you're in a much better state than people who are only looking into their Cisco, not only from the exam perspective, but also from the real life perspective when you come to the job which is require your DevNet expert skills. Ansible part, taking quite a bit of time in our training, so discussion, everything that you might need to have in the Ansible, writing the code, variables, loops, conditionals, working with the vaults, with the secrets, working with the Ginger templates, working with the processing of the input, so structuring the output collected from the networking devices, converting the output into the structured data set, so that you could work with them much easier than with just the list of the file, and also working with the Galaxy to be able to install external dependency outside of the standard Python track. We're looking into the latest Python version 2.11 to this date, and we're constantly updating the training. However, we're also explaining how the legacy, so Prelude 2.10, so 2.9 is working, so that you are able to write the code and use the code both in the older version of the Ansible and the newer, because in the exam it's not yet clear which version of the Ansible will be used. We hope it will be the latest one, but we never know, right? Python, very important part, obviously. As we're spending a lot of time with the Ansible, more than 10 hours, we're spending also with the Python, talking about all the possible aspects, such as working with the variables, working with the code flow control elements, loops, conditionals, writing the code with the classes and objects, object-oriented programming, and touching all possible APIs, CLI, netconf, RESTconf, and JNMI. So you are able to manage through the provided you have the documentation, API documentation, either YAML model or any other details. You're able to configure the device, Cisco, Nokia, Arista, so that you have the possibility to write the code to manage the devices. Once you master all the block, and we show you intentionally in parallel for multiple devices simultaneously, so that when you get the lab, which is having, instead of say Cisco, Nokia, and Arista, in Cumulus you have Cisco, iOS, iOS and Nexus, there is not a fear for you that there are too many different platforms, so you're not yet sure how it will work. It will work because you already will test it in much more complicated environment. You know, in order to be able to pass the exam of DevNet from the first attempt, or at least from the second, you need to prepare for much worse condition. You need to have much more complicated experience, and we for guarantee given this for you. And besides that, in the end, we are finally touching the work with any REST API external application. So how you could integrate your Ansible or Python script with a third party, so that you'll be able to read the REST API documentation, understand how it is working, and to be able to create your own script working with the documentation. Beside that, we're also explaining the problems which are arising with the Python and the Ansible in terms of the performance and how they could be overcome. So exploring various ways such as synchronous execution, asynchronous execution, multi-threading, multi-processing will give you clear view what is needed from the automation perspective. Besides what we have in the training, we have a lot of information in our blog, and we will underpin to you which materials are relevant to which of the DevNet training. All in all, our training will give you the very big boost into the networking automation world, and especially if you want to pass the DevNet Expert. From the experience, when you are preparing to the any expert training, you would be taking probably some official certification guide, which is, by the way, from the training perspective, would help you a lot. Network automation, programmability fundamentals created by Jeff Doyle, Khaled, Vinit, and myself, and which is very much matching to this training, so to this exam. And knowing how this stuff is working, we have basically multiplied it to all the examples in much bigger scale and multi-vendor things. One of the important things then, when you are passing the exam, you will be looking for 1, 2, 3 books. Same with the training. You, in order to be able to pass the exam, remember in my own CCA exam, I was taking the training from the INE, I was taking the traffic from the NABRIC, I was taking traffic from the CCA 360. The more training you take, the more experience you take, the more different views, the better you're ready for the exam, and the better you're ready for the real world, because the real world is much harsher, I mean, of the automation, of the building automation, maintain automation solution than the exam itself. So our training will help you a lot. We definitely recommend you to join this, and it will boost your preparation to the DevNet Expert by very, very much. Thanks a lot for watching. You still have opportunity to purchase this training with a discount till the end of the Black Friday. Otherwise, we have a live training starting earlier in the January, and we will all welcome you on this training. Thank you very much for watching this video. We wish you all the best. We wish you a lot of success and joy on the network automation way, on preparation with this training. And we hope to see you at our trainings. Take care and goodbye.